Dope Black Podcast.
Hello guys, and welcome back to another Dope Black Dad podcast. My name's Cameron, and today I want to be a bit controversial. I've got this saying, everyone should homeschool. Now hear me out, okay? When I say homeschooling, what I mean by it is where teaching and learning happens outside of school hours, whether you decide to keep your kids in school or take them out completely. It's all about what happens at home. And this whole idea of homeschooling kind of came to me because I met a friend, this is way back when I was a kid, who was homeschooled, and I was like, wow, what's that all like? And it really was quite interesting to hear his kind of story. And through my experience going through school, I've been to private school, I've been to public school. My mum was very much the kind of grades kind of person. And I was relatively academic, but I was more creative. And I only realized that a majority of the kind of life decisions that have made a huge impact on my life kind of come from my times outside of school. And this isn't just to turn people off going to school at all. What I'm saying is what happens outside of the school time, the teaching and learning that happens outside of school, is huge for your children, and it was huge for mine. So the first kind of topic I wanted to talk about was learning doesn't start or stop at school. So like I mentioned, I went to a lot of after school clubs back in my day. Not that I'm that old. And I found my kids, it was more about family outings. So we do a lot of family outings, especially now. I think it's such a huge thing that has helped me become a better parent, be a better person. And I've seen how it's impacted my kids, the ability to take them out of the space that they're used to, whether that's home, whether that is school, and teach them through the experiences they're having there and then. So I'll give you an example. At the moment, I'm currently in lovely Vietnam. We're traveling at the moment, so I'm in Vietnam, and my kids wanted to know a bit more about the history, believe it or not. And that's understandable. There's a lot of old buildings around where we were staying. There's a place where you could see tanks and stuff like that. And they were asking questions about the war. What's the war? Why did they go to war? All of this kind of stuff. Bear in mind, they're 4 and 6, which is quite interesting. And we found out there's this thing called Coochie tunnels. So we went on a trip, and it was about a 2-hour drive. So props to them for standing a 2-hour drive to this place called Coochie tunnels. And at this place, obviously, you can learn all about the history. And to be honest, for them, it was kind of boring. Obviously, they're just hearing all these dates and stuff. And it was just like, what is going through my head? But what they were learning as well on top of that was the kind of bite-sized stuff that we kind of look past. So things like they were telling us how big the tunnels were, which are like 20 centimeters for people to fit through. And my kids were like, what's 20 centimeters? So we tried to work it out. We were using our hands to work out how wide the hole was. They asked questions about how did they dig the holes, what were they using, they even had a go at doing it. And when we came back from this huge outing, I asked them a lot of questions about how they found it, what they learned from it and all this kind of stuff, what they thought was really cool, what they didn't really like, what they thought of war, all of this stuff. And upon reflection of how that entire day went, I realized that for my kids, they probably don't care too much about history, and they probably didn't care too much about what they were learning in that essence. But I think the experience of being able to learn just like they would at school, and just like they would with their teachers, and just like they would with their friends, but to have me there, you could see they were enjoying having that time of having their dad be around them, be invested in them, and actually teach them something. Whether it's something they liked or not, it was more of the experience that they were after. And that's what I mean by the importance of homeschooling and seeing yourself as a teacher when your kids come back from school. When I first thought about being a dad and thinking about having to take the kids to school and all this stuff, and my own experience, it kind of was like your teachers are your teachers and your parents are your parents. There's a separate divide between the two. But in actual fact, when you start to take on the responsibility to be involved in your kids' learning and your kids' education, what you'll find is, or what I find at least, is that the kids really, 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 really appreciate that experience. And they appreciate being able to spend time with you, and they appreciate what they're learning a lot more. And I know I definitely did when I was a child. One thing that I've definitely found from the homeschooling experience, and I'm sure many parents can relate with this, is homework time. It's kind of dreaded by kids and kind of dreaded by adults, but it is for me definitely. And I've always struggled with the home time. Even now, I still struggle with it. And what I've found is being creative is huge and so important at this point. So let me give you an example, right? Like I said, my kids are 4 and one of them is 6. And it's mainly for the 6-year-old. Obviously, she has homework. It's normally just like writing and reading and maths and maybe a bit of science and learning about some kind of culture. And back at school, when they were given homework, and how our kind of lifestyle was set up, I still had work that I had to do after finishing work when they needed to sort out their homework. Same with my wife. So it was really hard to dedicate time towards their homework. And I'm sure people can relate with that 100%. So what I found that helped me get involved with homework time is you need to make it engaging for yourself as well as your child. So I'll give you an example. My youngest, he's currently learning how to count to 10, obviously, and learning how to count up to 10 and down to 10. And doing that day in, day out gets really boring because it's not, you're not having to use your mind too much. You can see them really struggling, and it can all just get frustrating for everyone involved. So we created a little bit of a game. So what I do is I get a deck of cards and we threw it all over the floor. I made an absolute mess with it. And obviously he loved that part of it. And I was like, right, now we need to pick it up, but we need to put it up in order. So what we started doing was picking up all the number 10s, and you would have to try and find out which one were the 10s. Pick up all the 8s, pick up all the 7s, so forth, and you get the idea. And it was a really creative way because I found it more engaging because I could see him trying to find these numbers, and it was more active and it was more creative. So that's something that engaged me, and seeing him do that, you could see it engaging him. So that was a win-win for us both. And obviously, yeah, he was learning his numbers. Give you another example. With my daughter, she's obviously learning to read and write at this kind of age, and she's a really good reader, but she's been struggling with her writing a little bit more. And again, it can be really annoying. I don't know if anyone's ever taught their children how to write and reading with phonics. It's this new thing. I didn't do this back when I was a kid, but they're doing it now. And it's so hard to teach kids phonics. Not because it's difficult, because the English language is difficult. What I found the hardest was just keeping it engaging because it's really boring for them, and it is for me. So we tried to make it a little bit more fun. Again, like I mentioned, we're traveling. So when we were on beaches, we'd do the lettering in the sand. When I'm cooking, we'd buy flour, pour the flour on the table, and just have to do the lettering in the flour while I'm making food. We've also can do stuff with paint. And I actually, one day I found my daughter, she got some rocks from like this little gravel part by where we were staying, and she was trying to write I love you dad in the rocks. Obviously heartstrings were like pulled, but it was really cool to see she'd really taken on to learning how to write and understanding the different phonemes and all this kind of stuff, and using it in a creative way. So yeah, my main point is make it engaging for yourself as well as your children. And that kind of brings me on to the next point, which is passion learning. What do I mean by this? And passion learning is things that you enjoy and learning more of it. So ask yourself, what do you enjoy? Ask your children, what do they enjoy? Maybe you know already, and get creative with it. Okay. Now, when it came to homeschooling during the pandemic, I'm sure everyone struggled with this. And I struggled, but it was an eye-opener, which has pretty much changed everything I do now with my life, because I was so forced and thrown into being involved in my kids' education. So obviously, if you're still working at home, because I know some people are still having to do that and some people are choosing to do that, or some people are choosing to take the kids out of school and homeschool them, which is cool. I would advise showing them what you do for your job, if you can, if you are able to in some way. And one thing that we did, which was quite cool, is I'd make them my assistant. So obviously I'd be doing a lot of filming and a lot of editing and all this kind of stuff with the job I'm doing now. And I'd get them to help me set up the camera, or I'd get them to help put the mics around, we'll do the lighting and things like that. If you're someone who's like office based and you're on the computer all the time, what you can do is you can get them to pretend they're making an email. They have to write out their email and send it off to this random person for you. Just make it like a fake email. You can do like santaclaus@gmail.com. Hopefully that person isn't going to get bombarded if that is an email address. But yeah, try and be creative with how you can share what you're doing for your work or share what you do with your passions, and use that as a way to engage with your kids. The next step I wanted to talk about was traditions. And this one hits deep and quite deep for me, to be honest. My kind of family traditions and family culture is very weird. Like, I did not grow up, one, I didn't grow up with a dad, but two, I didn't really grow up in what I felt like was black culture. I've kind of started to grow and develop in with it now. A lot of my culture and traditions came from the after school activities that I did, the friends that I hanged around with, and just it just didn't feel like the things you see on TV. And I think that's kind of my own limiting belief, or my own interpretation of what I believe black culture is. And I just felt like there wasn't very much culture in my childhood, but I really wanted that to be completely different for my kids, because I've now obviously grown up, I've experienced loads of different cultures, and I still am, and I just find it so exciting to find out how different people live and incorporate that stuff into my life and just understand how other people live. So, traditions, what to keep and what to create. So the kind of traditions, if you want to call it that I've decided to keep in my life. I remember as a kid, my granddad used to always, and I didn't have a really good relationship with my granddad, but my granddad, when we were cool with each other, or he was trying to be special with me, he always used to do this thing where he would put me on his knee, and he'd shake his knee up and down and pretend it was a train. And I used to absolutely love this, and I mean love this. I'd be like, no, don't stop, I love it, I love it, I love it. Obviously after 5 minutes he'd be chucking me off and be like, no, I'm going back to whatever he was doing. And I used to love it so much, and it's something that I always remember, and I'm so grateful through my relationship with my granddad. So I've started doing something very similar with my own kids. So that's one of the traditions that I definitely wanted to keep. Now, in terms of the traditions that I'm starting to create, a lot of it is from me understanding a lot more about myself and a lot more about life, and trying to make sure the things that I hold as my like morals is being able to translate them into something that my kids can understand. So one of those traditions that we started doing that recently, I say recently, we've been doing this since they were able to talk really, was before bed we always do the bedtime song, and we created a little basically words of affirmation, if you want to call it, where we do this song every single night. The kids absolutely love it, and I think at this age, I'll be honest, I don't think they really understand the power of what they're saying. But it's one of those things where when they look back, they'll go, oh God, I remember when dad used to make me do this, and understand the meaning. And because they've heard it so many times and been doing it so much, and I'm creating that bond with them, I think that's where it will really home, especially when they grow up. And I'm already seeing it now in the essence of, with my son, part of his song, it says, I am bold, I am brave. And even now, whenever he's doing something he's a bit scared, he'll sing this song to himself before he does something that he's scared of. And that, as a father, is phenomenal to watch. At the end of the day, one of the main things I wanted to bring across in this entire podcast is learning is constant. It is constant. From the moment kids wake up, from the moment kids are born, they're always learning. Whether you think, it's one of those things, you can't think that learning is just simply 9 to 3 when they're at school. Learning is always happening whenever their eyes are awake, their eyes are open, they're always learning. From when a kid is born, they learn to look at their hands, they find out they've got feet, they learn about their feet. And the reason why a child decides to walk is they see you do it first. And that kind of is a perfect segue into the idea that when I say learning is constant, understand that your kids are watching you, and they do, every parent will agree with this, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do, okay? Both your positive traits and your negative traits. The more times that you can show them your positive traits, and the more times you can be involved in that learning from when they wake up to when they go to sleep, the more you're involved in that learning, the more you're nurturing your child to be the greatest person they can be through your own teachings. And being involved in your child's learning, what you might find is you might learn a thing or two yourself. I learned a lot about my negative traits from my kids picking them up. So it's one of those things. Just try and be more involved with your kids. Just try and make sure that you don't see their teachers as the only ones teaching your kids. Believe me, it's not true. It's your teacher, their teachers, and it's also yourself. I've been Cameron. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please give us some feedback on how it went. This is my first one. I'm super excited about it. And guys, I will see you in the next one. Stay dope.